Sometimes the deepest pain births the most powerful purpose. What do we do when life shatters our dreams and leaves us holding grief too heavy to bear? Today's conversation is one of resilience, legacy, and the beauty that can emerge from heartbreak. Welcome to the It's Your Story to Tell podcast. I'm your host, Megan Babcock, and today I'm honored to sit with Debbie Simmons. Debbie is a mother of 9 through the miracle of adoption and the founder of Anchor Point, a ministry born out of unimaginable loss. She's going to talk to us today about her story of losing her quadruplets and how God worked in her life and transformed that pain into purpose. And she is creating a legacy that continues to empower families and leaders today. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me and being willing to share your story today.
Excited to be here. It's going to be fun.
These conversations are the highlight of my week because they are just so encouraging to be able to see how God can move through all of these things that are so hard. So for listeners, thank you for being here. And Debbie, would you just start by taking us back to that season of loss and how you even began to process something so hard?
Sure. I would love to do that. It's a ride that has highs and it has lows, but it's still a very good story, and God is, redeeming that for me. But if we back up before losing the boys, one thing we have to know about me is that I had this dream in my mind that I wanted to be a young grandma.
Are you tired of repeating the same patterns, feeling stuck in your story, and wondering if real change is even possible? In my new book, Unstuck, Break Free from What's Holding You Back and Create a Life You Love, I walk you through the path from survival to transformation, blending faith, neuroscience, and soul deep healing. This book, it's not just words on a page, it's a companion for your journey. Whether you've experienced trauma or just feel lost in the noise of life, Unstuck will meet you there with truth, compassion, and tools that actually work. It's time to stop surviving and start living your story with purpose. Grab your copy today on Amazon and let me know what you think.
And so I knew how to go about accomplishing it because I'm a girl that accomplishes anything. So, find a guy, fall in love, get married, have children. You could be young grandma, right? And so this was my plan. And I set out to do it and found the guy, fell in love, got married in right after college. And then we were hit with infertility for years. And if you look at something that will really get at who you are and your self-worth. And I remember one of the times when we couldn't get pregnant right at the very end, and I was just like, I just wish I was dead. I can't, my body won't perform. I feel like a failure as a future mom, and I can't be a mom. And what about, a spouse? And just like, it just really tore into like who I was, because I could do anything. And here I am. I cannot control this. And so in our very, very last try at getting pregnant, we actually got pregnant. And so I was super excited because we were diagnosed with twins initially. And I was like, great, back on track to young grandma. We'll do it 2 at a time. This is taking so long. It's all good. And around 13 weeks, I started bleeding everywhere. Ended back up in the high risk doctor's office for an ultrasound. And I remember sitting in the waiting room and I looked at my husband and I said, wouldn't it be funny if we went in there and they told us we were having triplets when we think we're fixing to lose one or both of these kids? And he was like, yeah, that'd be funny. And I was like, and we go in and everything in the high risk doctor is super big, and every screen, everything. And she immediately put that probe on me and I went, there's 3. And so she finished doing her stuff and she was like, let's take one last picture. And as soon as she went to do it, I was like, oh, there's 4. And I was like, don't even look for any more because I
Yeah.
can't handle it. It's like, it's all high risk at this point. And she said, well, I need to go get the doctor. I said, really? No joke. And the doctor came in and she was like, okay, I'm going to help you. We're going to figure your way through because we had gone through kind of this whole identity thing. And then we were pregnant with twins and we knew it was pretty amazing to make it to each day next day, then to almost lose those and then get pregnant with four. We have four. And it's like, oh my gosh, getting to the next day is a miracle. So I remember totally losing it the first night when I got home and I was talking to my mom. And the problem was I was picking up everything that was to come. So I was like, I can't get them home from the hospital. I can't get 4 car seats in the car. How are you going to take care of 4 kids? How are you going to afford all the school supplies? And what about if they all decide to go to college? How am I going to pay for that? And what if they're all girls and have to pay for their weddings? How in the world? So I had picked up all of this anxiety and worry, 25 years down the road, and I'm trying to figure it out while there's 15 weeks in the womb. And my mom was like, let's just do every day, one
Mm,
day at a time. And
so
that
good.
was so, yeah, that was so relieving to me to go, that's an, that's an excellent idea because I can't handle what I was just doing. And it would never be good for me. Right. And so because it was so high risk, we learned to really live in the moment of, we make it to the next day, you make it to the next day, you make it to the next day. At 26 weeks, our goal is to get to 30. And at 26 weeks, we are on our way to the hospital to go take a tour. And we get rear ended on the freeway.
Mm,
And I remember I don't feel very good. And ultimately, the doctor kept us overnight because I was having contractions. And, we still knew every next day was a blessing, right? And so we go back home. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, I was standing in a pool of water and one of the sacs had ruptured and they put me in the hospital. And the next morning, contractions came. And I knew it because I couldn't feel anything before, but this time I knew it. And one of the babies had just stuck their hand through my stitched cervix and was waving to the world they were coming. And the doctor, I looked at her like, can we stop this? Forget this is going to happen. Let's just forget all of this. And she was like, no. And so Zach came and they placed him in my arms and I rocked him and held him and loved him until he passed into eternity. And then the question became whether I would get sick. And I got very sick. And about 3 or 4 hours later, the doctor came in and said, you have to induce. And so they induced, and Josh, Nate, and Chris came a little while later, and each one got placed in my arms. And I held them as they drifted off into eternity. Then we sat there with broken hearts and empty arms. And, you go to the hospital with these plans of celebrating. And here we are going, okay, how do we figure out a funeral? Not just
mm,
one, but four. And I remember that night in the hospital, like crystal clear after all this had happened. And I just was sitting there and I was going, how can I get through this? This is really hard. I don't even know how to do this. I don't know, like, this is like brand new territory, right? I just remember finally going, okay, God, I don't know any other way. I don't know any way but to trust you with this. And I said, the pain's too great and all this stuff. And he literally whispered to me, I need you to give me your why. And what I learned was that, when we're in hard situations, we all want to ask why. Why me? Why the situation? Why my kids? And he's like telling me to give up my last question I had, right? And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is my security blanket. It's all I have left. And if I could just have this answer, then everything would be better. But the reality is even if God himself would have showed up that night standing in front of me and given me the answer for why, it would never satisfy. It wouldn't bring my voice back. It wouldn't stop my pain, wouldn't change my situation. And so I've just learned over time there is no answer on this side of eternity for why.
mm.
And when we are in the why question is when we get stuck. And so I finally just said, okay, God, I'll give you my why question, but now what in the heck do I do? Because I'm like, I don't know how to do this, right? And he's like, ask me a different question. And I'm like, what? I don't know. And he's like, ask me, how do I survive? And so that's the question I began asking. And it turned out to be, hey, I need to keep breathing and I need to do the next best step that I can think of. And so I just started out of faith and obedience, taking positive steps that I could think of, whatever it was for me, take a positive, faithful step. And God met me in that situation, shined the light at my path, and I figured out the next best one. And this is how my faith muscle began to grow, right? And He walked me through the healing process. And ultimately, as I got better, I realized, okay, I'm doing better, but God, I don't want to be like sad all the time. And I don't want to be like stuck. And I was like, I want to live. I want to have joy. And so you say you are a redeemer of stories. And so I want you to redeem my story. And so I learned to ask the question, how do I thrive? And as I did that, that gave God a lot of room to work. And so I began to work with other ladies who had lost children or grief groups. And that led ultimately to adopting and to starting the ministry and writing a book and all the things that we do. But it all came out of that pain and learning how to trust God with my story and Him showing me how to take each step of every day.
Wow. What I love and can identify with in my own story of walking
Mhm,
through pain is how God showed up when I was willing to invite Him in, even if it was in that moment of desperation where you're just like, I don't know what to do. I can't do anything else.
mhm.
Help.
Yeah.
And that quiet whisper that He had very similarly, a different a different answer, but the
Mhm,
answer I needed. And that's what's so amazing about allowing God to walk you through this process is He knows you and He
mhm,
knows what you need, and He even will give you a clue on what question to ask to help you
mhm,
keep going. And for me, He told me I needed to take my thoughts captive when I cried out. And I was like,
mhm,
oh my goodness, we're going to be here forever, God. Take my thoughts captive. I want a miracle, like snap your fingers, make the life
mhm,
the one I want, the dream. But what God has shown me, and even through you sharing that, is that there's so many things that He wants to show us through the process
mhm,
that if He can, and He's done miracles where it's one, He just speaks it and it's done. But
mhm,
for me, He wanted to walk my heart through a process so that I could then also share that with others. I didn't know that that was what was happening in that
mhm,
moment. But looking back, you're like, wow, He knew what He was doing.
Praise the
And
Lord, He does.
yes. And thank goodness I didn't have to just figure it all out on my own. One of the things my coaching practice is built on is the power of curiosity and asking God the questions,
Mhm,
even if it's, I don't even know what the right question is to ask, and then
mhm,
listening, because when we invite Him in, He's so excited to show us. When He's a gentle God and doesn't overstep His welcome because He gave us free will. So just by opening ourselves up with that question,
mhm,
it allows Him an invitation to start showing you what to do.
mhm,
And then I love the other thing you said is it was a really big question, how to thrive. And that
mhm,
took you in so many different places that God
mhm,
exposed you to all of these different things as part of that. We don't want to limit God, right? If we just let me get through this day, and some days we're praying that, but we want to have a big prayer because He's a big God and He wants to show up in a way that He turns what felt impossible into possible. And so He took you through that and allowed you to come alongside other women. And was that what led you to creating Anchor Point?
Yes, it's a ministry that I started about 15 years ago. And it really came about not because I was working with women who are grieving, but it came out of the loss to say, hey, I love kids. I love family. I want to help families thrive. And so that ministry is built all around that and helping parents know how to connect with their kids and to be successful with their kids. And if they're struggling with choosing life for the child they carry. We want to just be in that space of loving these people and helping them walk through like their big why questions and how do I do this and how do I survive this? Because most of us want to be good parents. We just don't know how to do it. Right. And so starting the ministry was really, I was working in full time ministry and I had 7 kids at the time. And God's like, do this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm doing
Have you
full
seen
time.
my schedule?
I'm like, I work in full time ministry, God. And not only that, I brought a full time mission field in my house. And so there is no break. He's like, no, I want you to do this. And we wrestled for a while, but it was, you never end up winning with God. And you got to know that, right? Because his way is the best way. But when I finally surrendered and was like, okay, God, you I'll do what you want me to do. And it was because I had a extremely painful job transition that
Mm.
he allowed me to be moved out of in about a week period. And I was like, okay. And after that dust settled, he was like, do you have time now? And I was like, yeah, I got plenty of time. I'll do it. And it's been wonderful. But, sometimes getting to the act of surrender when we have preconceived kind of notions in our mind of how our life should go, that is the journey that I think I constantly always am. I'm getting better, but now I'm a more yes girl. But I mean, it's like hard to go, okay, God, your dream is better than mine. And if it costs me all my time, all my money, all my energy, then so be it. And so it did. It cost a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of energy. But I will tell you, the transformation of lives impacted. I can just tell you story after story after story. And I promise you, I would do it for just one of them.
Ugh.
And we see thousands of them, and so I'm going, he is so good in that. And it's something that can, when my friend and I kind of started it, it was something that we were like, okay, let's build something that lives longer than we do here and makes an impact after
Mm.
we're gone. And that's kind of how we landed there. It was really his prompting based on kind of who he's wired me to be. And it's interesting because all of the skills I had accumulated over the years, he's using them. Whether it's my engineering background, my business background, my ministry background, it all gets used in building a nonprofit from scratch. And so it's been a wild journey, but it has been so fun to kind of live on the faith edge and be able to go, I don't know how in the world we're going to do this if he doesn't show up. And he shows up somehow,
Mm.
and he always does. And I'm getting used to his timing being a little bit different than mine, but other than that, we're doing great. So that's how it started, was really out of the loss and this desire to impact more people, because we all need hope and we all need the ability to work through our stuff so that we can be difference makers.
Wow. I just love how God brings people into my life through podcasting as even just an encouragement for me. As you're telling that story, I'm like 2.5 years into the journey. Um, God was calling me. Back in 2007, I was in a Beth Moore Bible study, Get Out of That Pit. And she was talking about decorating the pit. And I was like, well, I got you one further. I was dusting my pit. In one of the meetings, he said, you're going to be going into that darkness of people's pit, pulling them out and shining light. I have no idea how that's going to work out. I don't even know how to get really out of my own situation. And it really took I'm a slow mover when it comes to things that I don't understand.
Yeah.
And he's been working with me. So It wasn't until around 2016, 2017 where there was major shift and things in my life that I could no longer deal with. And I was in that really broken place, crying out to God, and He was answering. And how my life continuing to transform, learning things as I was taking my thoughts captive, placing them under submission of Christ, and the fruits of the Spirit is where He led me, and how my mind became transformed, my identity was replaced. And I knew I had to go and help others to get out of that darkness, and that it was possible. And I ended up getting certified as a nurse coach. I have a background in business and so many other things, administratively gifted, operationally. And as I was coaching in the practicum to get my hours, I knew God was saying, this is the direction that you need to go. But I was just like, God, I make too much money. I'm embarrassed to say that was the thing, but when it came out of my mouth when I was working with my own coach, I can't believe I said that. I'm putting this over my comfort, my family's enjoying our lifestyle over what He's calling me to. Well, He also allowed me to get laid off. And with a severance and a house we sold, He's like, okay, you now have a year's worth of income. Will you trust me and do what I asked you to do for a year? And in that moment, I knew that if I did anything other than that, I was being disobedient. Mm-hmm. Before that, I wasn't fully like, I'm not being disobedient. But now there was no question as to whether or not what obedience looked like. And that birth, It's Your Story to Tell, and now has become a nonprofit. And God does. He keeps giving me more to do where I'm like, how is this possible? And He's like, well, it's not by your works and it's not by your might. So why don't you just relax and let me lead this? And I'm like, okay, He has to continually remind me. And I am getting so much better at surrender, where it was years. Now I'm like weeks. So I just so resonate with that progression. And I'm excited for 15 years of doing this work and being able to have that kind of impact and legacy on not just your family's life, but how you're helping parents and other people become better versions of themselves. And the ripple effect is so amazing. So tell me, what does living in legacy mean? We hear that all the time.
So I tell people that we want to live our legacies now so that we have a legacy to leave. Okay. Now, all of us know that if we go through life, at the end of our life, there'll be something people will say about us, but will it be intentional? And for me, things just radically changed when you hold your boys and they die in your arms. And it was like everything. Everything from that point on was about eternity. Before, it had been about eternity, but it was like, that's kind of far off, And from that moment on, it was like, okay, how can I be super intentional with my life so that my life makes an impact now, but it builds a legacy for the future, right? And so so I think it really has to do with, are we living in the moment and are we being very intentional? So, a lot of us, like when I was struggling that one night with the kids and I was thinking about the college and all that stuff, and I was looking so far down the road that I was picking up anxiety and worry, and that would have taken me out. And then in life, a lot of times, if we look backwards, we pick up shame and regret and all this stuff. And when God says, be right here, right now, look at me, and I sit at a table for you to sit with me, and I will show you the way. And unfortunately, in my opinion, it's in the middle of my enemies. I'm like, I don't get that, God. But it is. I was like, beach scene or something like that. But this is where He puts it. And He puts it here because the more we keep totally focused on Him, the more the enemy's arrows drop. And then they begin to see, why is she staying so focused on Him? Why is she so different? And you know what? They want what I have. And so it's so powerful. So what we intentionally do now is laying the groundwork for impact after we're gone. And so I kind of see it as, hey, we're throwing these pebbles out there and it's starting to make ripples. And I'm just going, every family that comes to Anchor Point, I want them to be changed and I want them to become difference makers and to be intentional about their life. And there's just so much good needed in our world that the more of us that live this way, it's a very bright light in a very dark world, and it
Mm,
gives us a chance to reflect Jesus to the world. And so to me, that is what about being intentional about living your legacy now. And it creates what you want to leave behind in the end.
that's such a great way of thinking about it. So many times we think about down the road and how people are going to think about
Mhm,
us, and then we lose sight of what do I need to do
mhm,
just right in this moment. If my legacy was here today,
mhm,
what decision would I make
mhm.
in this place that I find myself? If you're not being that intentional, you'll never make it to that end goal. So thank you so much for sharing that. If you are listening today and you find yourself walking through a season of grief, know that you're not alone. And I just want to invite you to pause and reflect on where you've come from and consider the seeds of legacy that might be planted even in your hardest moments. Come back and join us for part 2, where Debbie and I are going to dive deeper into her work as a legacy coach and how you can begin to build a life that outlasts you. Thanks, Debbie.